As US Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump claims victory as he takes the lead against Kamala Harris, let's take a look at the reactions from global leaders now. Now, reacting to elections in the United States, China says it hopes for peaceful coexistence, mutual respect and win-win cooperation with the United States. Former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison congratulated Trump, saying that he will have a very positive impact on global security issues.
And in addition to having won the battleground states of North Carolina, I love these places, Georgia,
All right, and now we have with us on this broadcast Jessica Stone, who is a VOA correspondent. We also have Jody Cohen joining us from Renana in Israel. Joining us also on the broadcast is a special guest, Chris Doyle. He's a West Asia analyst and he will be speaking a lot more about a probable, because it's not been declared yet, Trump presidency. Let me first go across to you, Jessica. Kamala Harris has not declared defeat yet. Explain for the sake of our viewers how a possible Democratic win perhaps is also still a possibility.
Well, in terms of the total votes, she is well behind, of course, and Trump is within just 2 electoral college votes of winning the presidency. She would have to take not only the rest of the swing states, but many other states that have yet to be declared and have not ever gone for a Democrat or are not expected to go for a Democrat tonight. So we really are at a place where, based on the current math and the current projections, we are waiting for one more state to go to Trump, and that would secure his victory. Her path, once she lost Pennsylvania, was to win North Carolina and Georgia. As you know, those 2 states went to Trump, so she does not have a path now.
Jessica, what else can you see around you? Perhaps a couple of hours have elapsed since we've known which way the election results are going. Do tell me, what is it that you're gathering from talking to people around you?
Well, it's 4 a.m. here, so I haven't had a chance to talk to too many people. But I can tell you just the feeling is I think it's safe to say this was an overwhelming message about the economy from the American electorate. The exit polls indicate that that was the singular issue or the most possible issue that brought people to the polls. And most of the people that said that the economy was not on the right track did vote for Trump. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are happier, that they are in love with all of his policy proposals or even with his character, but it does mean that they are ready to get the current administration out and they associate Kamala Harris as the sitting vice president with the current economy and the current set of problems they say they are facing at home, whether that's high inflation, high prices at the gas pump. These are real issues, and this appears to be a big driving force in the American vote in the U.S. Election here.
Jessica, for the sake of our viewers, if you could just summarize, what is it that worked in Trump's favor this time around in terms of which states are the ones where he managed to clinch a victory and therefore probably headed for a presidency as well?
Favor is a couple of things. First of all, the early vote really came out in force for Republicans, and so they had already banked quite a few votes coming into today's day of voting. Secondly, we saw groups of people who traditionally do not vote Republican come out for Trump. We saw many more blacks in urban areas come out for Trump. We saw a real shift in the Latino men vote. Almost 50% of them voted for Donald Trump. And that is unusual. We hadn't seen that in 4 or 5 election cycles, and it's demonstrably different than their female counterparts within the Hispanic community. We also saw non-educated voters. More of them vote, and more of them come out for Trump. So part of what we're seeing is a shift in the way the parties are identified by the American electorate. We're seeing a lot more uneducated, working class people associate with the Republican Party under Donald Trump, and more higher income elite Americans associate with the Democratic Party. And that appears to be a factor here.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us with the latest on it. All right, let me now go across to West Asia analyst Chris Doyle. He's now joining us from London, and he's the director and spokesperson of Council of Arab-British Understanding. Chris, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. First, tell us, how do you think West Asia views a Trump presidency? Because on the one hand, Trump's policies traditionally have kept them wary of his presidency, and on the other, he's talking about ending the war. How would you perhaps view it in terms of the wars that are on in West Asia, and of course the general conflict that the region is ridden with?
I think the first thing to point out for most of those in West Asia, in Israel, in Palestine, and Lebanon in particular, the sense that the war is continuing. That's a reality. The insecurity is there, and the United States administration under Joe Biden had not brought about any ceasefires, had actually been complicit in many people's eyes with the atrocities that were going on. So there is no particular love for the Harris administration, but at the same time there's a nervousness about another second term for Donald Trump. That is in part because you're never really quite sure what you're going to get with him. Yes, he says that he wants to end these wars, but there isn't a blueprint. There isn't something that you can tangibly grasp to say this is how he's going to do it. This is how he's going to do something that President Biden and Kamala Harris were unable to do. And you see, certainly within Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu and those settlers who are absolutely thrilled with a Donald Trump victory, because they remember the 4 years of his first term when he moved the American embassy to Jerusalem and declared that the US recognized that as the capital of Israel, that he helped push forward the settlement project. He said that the Golan Heights, which is Syrian territory, was part of Israel. All of these things were major victories at the time for Benjamin Netanyahu. So I think there are many in Israel who are looking forward to this. But generally, I think the region is somewhat nervous. It was before these elections. It will remain so. And it will remain so until you do get a real and lasting ceasefire. Now, there are other issues why the region also, could be, nervous, because you don't know what the trade policies are, climate policies. These are all issues that, of course, will affect not just West Asia, but other areas of the globe. So it's that lack of clarity, perhaps, for the moment. But maybe one could say that this area and others, having seen Trump's presidency from 2017, for the sort of style of presidency that he will bring. We know what he's like. We have some sort of, idea that he's not going to be your typical American president at all, far from it, and everyone will adjust. So, yeah, it's uncertain times.
Jody, let me now go across to you. You spoke to us earlier of how Benjamin Netanyahu had congratulated Donald Trump. Jody, if you can hear me, and I would like to bring you in on this. Chris very keenly pointed out to the dilemma that West Asia faces in terms of Biden administration's stance in West Asia and a possible Trump presidency. How is Israel viewing it? Because on the one hand, the Biden administration, as it was accused of, supporting the war in West Asia, supporting Israel, so is Trump's presidency. So was there ever a dilemma for Israel there?
Two-thirds of Israelis were supporting President Trump's comeback. We know that Prime Minister Netanyahu...
We seem to have lost Jody's connection there. Chris, let me just throw that question across to you. You did point this dilemma out. Do you think there was ever any hesitation towards a Biden presidency, so to say, in Israel's view? Because, as you pointed out, Biden's administration was accused of possibly supporting the wars in West Asia. And on the other hand, Israel is looking forward to the Trump presidency as well, as is demonstrated by Netanyahu's message congratulating Trump after what we've seen of the election results so far.
President Biden, I mean, throughout his political career, has been a very warm supporter of the state of Israel, but he wasn't always that close to Netanyahu, held him responsible really for undermining the Obama administration, the Iran deal that Obama signed up to. So there was tensions between those two. So I think that those on the right in Israel saw that Trump would put less pressure on Israel in terms of the way that it conducts these wars. It will be that he would be, as he has been in his first term, always highly supportive of Israel. So it wasn't a choice between an anti-Israel candidate and a pro one, between a pro-Israel candidate and a very pro-Netanyahu candidate in Trump. So I think that, you know, that would be the key there. For Palestinians, of course, you know, they just see both as being anti-Palestinian, that Trump will probably be worse on that front. And of course, there's all this Islamophobic rhetoric for West Asia that also will be somewhat nerve-wracking, because Donald Trump, he was the president who promised a ban on all Muslim entry into the United States. He has certainly earned a reputation for embracing anti-Muslim speech, so he's not seen as favourable to that. So there will be nervousness there as well from them. But there will be various leaders, particularly in the Gulf, maybe Egypt as well, who will also see at a leadership level that Donald Trump will be sympathetic to them. He seemed to have a very good relationship to President Sisi of Egypt, for example, and Saudis and the Emiratis. Though the critics would say that Trump had a record of being very close to dictators and not so warm to America's traditional democratic
Chris, I'm going to just ask you another short question before I go over to our correspondent, Jody. You point out the difference of distinction between a pro-Israel and a very pro-Israel presidency. Would you say that this was also how Biden, perhaps within the Democrats, was an outlier, wherein perhaps countries like Israel were not really supporting a Kamala Harris bid as they were Joe Biden's?
I think that the issue of how Gaza played out in this election is very relevant in terms of Michigan. We see a lot of Arab Americans who clearly voted against Kamala Harris. Some even voted for Donald Trump. And in a community that overwhelmingly voted for Joe Biden, there is this strong sense of betrayal, that in their view that Biden allowed what many see as a genocide to occur in Gaza, and that therefore they could not vote for Kamala Harris. And she lost big time in that community, and indeed many others who were sympathetic to Palestinian rights who could not bring themselves to vote for Harris. So I think the Middle East did come into this election. I mean, I think, though, that broadly, I mean, the decision of Joe Biden to, you know, continue for that, you know, try to get a second term probably was fatal to the Democrats. That Kamala Harris never was tested in a primary, that she was a last-minute candidate, and that Joe Biden should, for the sake of the Democrats, you know, have stuck to just one term right from the beginning. But essentially, Biden's Middle East policy proved very unpopular, and basically, I think many people challenged him on it and were very unhappy with what's going on, that these wars weren't brought to an end.
Chris, you brought out a very pertinent point, how Biden's Middle East popular was viewed unpopularly in the eyes of the Americans. Are they, so to say, buying what Donald Trump is telling them about ending the war in West Asia?
I'm not sure that they are. I don't think that certainly Arab Americans are necessarily buying that. I think it was more an issue of for many Arab Americans, they could not put a tick in the box with Kamala Harris, that they felt that she was so complicit in what they see as a genocide going on in Gaza that they could not endorse her with a vote. Now, I think that, you know, it doesn't mean that they embrace the Trump approach, but, you know, they hold her responsible. It wasn't Donald Trump in the White House over the last year. It was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as vice president. And so Trump has gained through people not voting. Some vote for the third candidate, Jill Stein, you know, and that allowed certainly in certain key areas that to go forward. Of course, there's other issues that determine this election, the economy, you know, probably right out there on top, all sorts of things. But in terms of the Middle East, I think that's how it played out. And, you know, it's, you know, we shall see, you know, just what Trump brings to the table. I think there is an argument to say that he will be urging Netanyahu to get this over with, at least if not by the 20th January, when Trump will enter the White House, one assumes, but very shortly afterwards. So Trump can say, I've brought an end to this war, and give him 3 months to do his worst.
Thank you so much, Chris Doyle, for joining us with your invaluable inputs. Always a pleasure speaking to you, but we'll have to leave it there due to the paucity of time and go across to our correspondent, Jody Cohen now. Jody, for you, just get us the latest. This is a very dynamic situation, or we pretty much know which way this is headed. But what is it that you're picking up from around you in Israel?
Right, so Prime Minister Netanyahu was one of the first world leaders to congratulate President Trump. He called it history's biggest comeback. Other ministers have also been congratulating him, most notably the new defense minister and foreign minister. And President Herzog called President Trump a champion of peace and said that he's looking forward to working with him. Now, Hamas has said that Trump will now be tested on his boast about whether or not he can end the war. Remember, in Trump's speech where he accepted victory, he talked about the fact that he wanted to stop the wars, and he also gave a nod and a thanks to the support he received from Muslims and Arabs in America. Now, there's just been a barrage of rockets here across central Israel, in Ra'anana, in Tel Aviv as well, and that's what happened from Lebanon, and we heard that the sirens went off just as we were hearing an announcement that Hezbollah's new leader, Naim Qassem, is going to be giving a speech later this afternoon in response to the US presidential election. We're also hearing from Iran that they're downplaying the results of the election, but it remains to be seen what the results of the election and President Trump 2.0 now means for Iran, and particularly Iran's threatened strike on Israel.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.